Star Wars. There are very few phrases that elicit such illicit memories and an illicit response as Star Wars. It is one of the biggest film franchises in the world, one of the biggest franchises in general in the world. It's made billions of dollars, not just at the box office, but outside of the box office. And that's really where Star Wars lives. Is not in the movies, but in the things, the toys. Things last forever, as we all know. Star Wars, originally released in 1977, of course, by the revolutionary director George Lucas. There's a really funny story about Star Wars when the deal was first made and when it was first released. 20th Century Fox, when they were making the deal with George Lucas, this was a really big gamble. You have to think about the time, most of the movies were just not Star Wars. There weren't really many heroes. There was a lot of anti-heroes. There was Dirty Harry. There was, things like that where the good guy was kind of a bad guy. And so that was kind of that was the exciting part of film. But George Lucas wanted to tell on the surface, good versus evil space opera. We know that Star Wars is far deeper than that. It's, a commentary on the Vietnam War and the rebels and Viet Cong and all that. If you don't know that, you should absolutely look that up. But Star Wars is a much more complex thing than just a movie, and George Lucas knew this, and he knew that it would really be a big deal for people, particularly children. I mean, say what you want about the prequels, George Lucas knew who he was making his movies for, and he was not wrong. And so one of the parameters of the deal that he made with 20th Century Fox was that he would make this movie for a lot less money than he wanted to make it for. And he, as a director, would ask for a lot less money than he would usually want. And one of the biggest facts that he really, really wanted to maintain was ownership of the other two movies. He had Star Wars, the original, A New Hope, as it eventually was known. But he had Star Wars, but he had the other two parts of the story. But the one thing that he really wanted to maintain was the merchandising rights. This was a stroke of financial genius, whether or not you want to talk about the commercialization of film and things like that. But in terms of financial genius, this is amazing. Because George Lucas knew that if this movie was not something that 20th Century Fox liked, if they thought, this isn't really a movie that we want to promote or that we really want to have a lot of people see because it's embarrassing or it's not what we thought it was going to be. George Lucas thought, I can sell this movie myself because if I maintain the merchandising rights, I can make t-shirts, I can make hats, I can make comic books, I can do whatever I want. And I can sell this movie myself, even if the studio doesn't want to do that. I can do it. I can get people to see this movie. I retain the merchandising rights. So it actually wasn't really made for the financial. It was for the promotion. He wanted to be able to say, I want people to see this movie, and if I have to do it myself, I will. But of course, Star Wars was the biggest thing ever. And naturally, everybody wanted Star Wars toys. I mean, as I said, it was a movie for kids. I mean, it was a space movie. Everybody loves a space movie, but kids particularly. There's Chewbacca, there's spaceships, there's all these really fun things. And children wanted to play these characters, and action figures were a big thing. And it's really, there's so many little things that sort of came out of it. They were, Pez dispensers, there were, masks on the back of cereal boxes. You would cut out the face of Mark Hamill and you'd wear it for Halloween. But one of the things that was very big was action figures. There was a company called Kenner, and they made action figures and things. And George Lucas had to deal with them to produce action figures for Star Wars. Star Wars came out in the summer of 1977, May 1977. And Kenner Toys was like, you can get action figures for Christmas. It'd be great. But they severely underestimated the demand, and they absolutely did not have the stock. And so for Christmas 1977, for all the kids who wanted, Star Wars action figures, you would get essentially a Kenner cardboard back that had pictures of all the action figures and a little certificate, and it said, mail this in, and you'll get your action figures as soon as we can make them. So for Christmas, kids were opening up literally certificates to get a toy. That's how big Star Wars was. It was called the Early Bird Certificate Package, and it was the most exciting thing. It was incredible. The Kenner toys, it was amazing. And so from the very beginning, Star Wars and toys and merchandise have gone hand in hand. From the moment the thing was released, people wanted stuff from it. And so it's only natural that Lego and Star Wars became a thing. But curiously, even though Lego's been around for, 100 years, it wasn't until 1999 the first Lego Star Wars sets were made. And Lego had been making, sets since the 1950s. They had houses and boats and gas stations, all these things. Not very detailed, but they've been making Lego sets for half a century. And it wasn't until 1999, obviously, to coincide with the release of The Phantom Menace. And since 1999, there's been over 800 Lego Star Wars sets. And it just makes sense. And it's really kind of fascinating to look at the evolution of Lego Star Wars products from the relative simplicity of the original sets. You can look at, they have those big, massive, Millennium Falcon and Death Star sets that started really kind of simply, and now they're literally thousands of pieces. It's really quite impressive. And Lego and Star Wars have been really a match made in heaven. And so naturally, what's the next step from physical products? It's digital products, and that is video games. So the first Lego Star Wars video game was the prequels, episodes 1, 2, and 3, and it was released in 2005. It was actually released about a month before episode 3. So you could actually play the Lego Star Wars game and kind of get the feel of what the episode was going to be before you actually saw the movie. And Lego Star Wars, the game, it was the first Lego movie adaptation in a video game form. Since then, there's been dozens, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. There's been so many different franchises that have been put into Lego video game form. But Lego Star Wars, the game, was the first one. And I love that game. That was so much fun. It was so silly, and it was so funny, and it was so incredible, and it was really novel. It was really curious. It was really funny because at the time, Lego games, well, Lego Star Wars was the only Lego game, but Lego games, they didn't talk. The minifigure, they didn't talk when they were doing the cutscenes. They would literally just mumble. And we'll talk about mumbling later, but it was really silly, and it was really cute, and it was really fun. And playing these games were really, really great. And as a bonus little episode of Lego Star Wars the game was the first level of A New Hope. So then the next year we got Lego Star Wars, the original trilogy, the original 3, episodes 4, 5, and 6, are now Legoized, and it was glorious. It was so much fun. And then the year after that, put them all together, all 6 movies, the complete saga, and it was, it was just great. It was just great. And very few games you can go back to now and just have a good time. Games from, 2007. Name games from 2007 that you could go back to today and go, this is still pretty great. This is still really fun and silly. Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga was that. It was so well done, and it was so much fun, and if you liked Star Wars, this was the way to do it. This was the way to go. And, this was obviously after the prequels had ended. Star Wars was effectively over as far as we knew, and this was sort of the cap on it, and it was really, really just a lot of fun. Little did we know, of course, Star Wars was not over. A couple years later, the Lego Star Wars brand was still growing. It was still being a huge, big, massive product in the physical space, so obviously another video game had to come out. And Clone Wars was such a popular show at the time. In 2011, they made Lego Star Wars Clone Wars. Now, I've never actually played this game, because I never really watched Clone Wars, so it was never really in my radar. It was never really, in my wheelhouse. But this was a very curious game because not only was the art style different, the gameplay was different, they were talking now. It was a far more complicated thing, And it's just sort of like also and also there's a Lego Star Wars Clone Wars. But then the Star Wars fandom explodes. George Lucas says, I'm selling Lucasfilm to Disney for billions of dollars, and they're going to make new movies. We all go insane. We go crazy. It's Star Wars. Star Wars is back. It's going to be great. Little did we know what was actually going to happen. But the movie comes out, Force Awakens. It's fine. And so then they, of course, release Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens, which is weird. It doesn't really fit in with the previous Lego Star Wars releases because the original game and then the original trilogy and then, of course, the complete saga had multiple movies in the game. And that's kind of just how Star Wars should exist. You should play multiple episodes, not just the one. And I will say, having had stepped away from the Lego video games for quite a few years, I played them when I was younger, but, grew up, had different games that I played. I said, Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens. I have to go back. This is going to be great. So I played Lego Star Wars The Force Awakens, and I was thoroughly disappointed. It was such a different game, but it was still, it was reminiscent of the original Star Wars games, which is great, but it just felt like it just wasn't enough. It just didn't match what I remembered and what I felt these games should be. It was just not as fun as it should have been, and it was really long, and it was really clunky, and there was this weird, third-person action game kind of thing going on, and but it was too far away, and there was a lot. It was a sloppy, clunky game, unfortunately. And I think it really did sort of deflate any possibility of making a Lego Star Wars The Last Jedi, or eventually The Rise of Skywalker. And I think there was I would imagine there was a genuine thought, maybe we shouldn't make any more Lego Star Wars games, because it's just not working out. Luckily, no one listened to that guy. And now we have the topic of what I'm talking about. Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga. All 9 movies in one. Now, to say we were all skeptical, I think is an understatement. Because not only have we already seen these 6 movies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we've already played those, and they're great. So do we really need to play those again, I don't know, with updated graphics? Does that really make any difference? Maybe not. But then, of course, you have this now sequel trilogy. There have been, there will be, there will always be long discussions about the value and the success and the failure of the sequel trilogy. I have my own opinions. I think they're not too unpopular. Let me say this. Okay. Of the sequel trilogy, The Force Awakens is the least offensive. It's the simplest. It's fine. It's the reboot. It's the soft remake of A New Hope. Fine. Okay, good. I really like The Last Jedi. Let me tell you why. I think The Last Jedi took what The Force Awakens left it and did the best it could. I think that what they did with Luke was actually kind of interesting. You make Luke Skywalker disappear, well then, why did he disappear? Is he running for something? Well, that's not very heroic. Is he hiding from something? Well, that's not very heroic. Is he looking for something? Why has he been gone for so long? No, he's been on an island for so long. Rian Johnson then had to figure out why, and he did. And you know what? You can dislike it. You can say, that's not Luke Skywalker. Mark Hamill can say, that's Jake Skywalker. I don't know who that is. Fine, whatever. I liked The Last Jedi. I think it's my favorite of the sequels. And then, of course, The Rise of Skywalker is a really bad movie, and I don't think anybody likes that movie. Babu Frick, very funny. Everything else, very terrible. Okay, losing track. Okay, so we have these 3 subpar movies. And we have these 6 movies that are fine. Of course, now we're in the sort of the prequel renaissance. We all now are looking back going, the prequels were great. Oh, yeah, you thought they were terrible. Now we just have something even worse to compare them to. But, so we already have these 6 movies that have been made into great games. And now we have these 3 movies that are not great movies. And is this the only new thing that's going to be in this new game? Well, great. How exciting. The crap is going to be the new stuff. We don't want that. But, thankfully, that's not what happened. Not only were the original 6 movies completely remade, redone, new missions, new ideas. The entire idea of a Lego Star Wars game was completely flipped on its head. So we can honestly say that Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is the definitive Star Wars game. I think it's one of the best Star Wars games ever made. That's including the, Battlefronts and all those things. It's just right. It just works. So let's talk about Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. Because, hopefully, there's going to be no more mainline episodic Star Wars movies. Star Wars is, again, hopefully, over. Because there's nowhere else to take the story. Plus, we've retold the story like 3-4 times. So let's look at this game. Let's look at this final chapter in the Skywalker Saga. And let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. So the first thing that we have to talk about is, and this was genuinely something that took me a minute to get over. They talk. I know. If you are a regular player of Lego games, this isn't new. They all talk. They talk. That's what they do now. But I am from the Lego Star Wars original trilogy, complete saga, original Star Wars game, where they literally just mumbled. And Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga has a mumble mode, which is very funny and it's very silly, but it's not the same. It's not the same. I encourage people to look up, if you haven't played the original Lego Star Wars games, look up how they dealt with talking, because it's really funny and it's really silly. And so, for example, when the pivotal moment, right? Luke, I am your father. Well, excuse me. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. No, I am your father. Let's get it right. When Darth Vader says, no, I am your father, in the mumble mode of Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, he kind of just mumbles those words. No. And that's fine. That's fine. But that's not really what the original Star Wars games did. Not only did they just mumble nothing, they just went... They had visual gags to facilitate the fact that there is no talking. So again, in the original Star Wars video games, Darth Vader holds out a Polaroid of young Anakin and a pregnant Padme and says, "See? I'm your dad." And it's that creativity that was just so funny and so unique. And it's, you're getting around these creative problems. I don't know why they didn't have talking Star Wars characters back then. Maybe it was a licensing thing, but they didn't. And so they worked around it. They said, that's fine, we'll figure it out. So it's a little bit different, and it takes a second to get used to it if that's where you're coming from, and that's where I was coming from. But you do get over it, because not only are a few actors from the movies in the game, so that makes it very nice, but a few people who are impersonating the original actors, obviously actors who have passed away, but the original actors who are not there, they do a very good job. They do a very serviceable job. So it's not bad. The first thing that you obviously notice beyond the talking is the visuals. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a beautiful game. It is probably it's too beautiful than it should be, honestly. This is a Lego game. Why is it so impressively pretty? It really is. It's something that is just, it blows you away. And it's not just the visuals in terms of the graphics, the resolution, whatever. The frame rate's very solid. But it's also the construction of things. Again, in the original Star Wars games, things were kind of made up. We'll take pieces from the real world and we'll turn them into the ships and we'll turn them into but if something has to be made up, it'll be made up because this is a video game and we're just going to make it work. Obviously, as I said earlier, there's been over 800 Lego Star Wars sets. So there's a lot of real-world reference for the developers to look at to say exactly where every piece goes. And so, whereas in the original trilogy, in the original games, there were just, long gray pieces, that's the ship. Now we see every single brick, every single spot. It's really impressive. And so there's just sort of this immersive feeling. And you can really tell that they looked at things like the Lego movie that just sort of convey the reality of it. And it's really, really wonderful. So the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga has all 9 movies. But more than that, they have hub planets. This is really an interesting concept. Again, I don't really know if there was something like this in other Lego games. I think Lego Worlds has something like this, but this is the biggest. In the original Lego Star Wars games, you would essentially, there was a central hub. In the original game, it was Dax's diner in the episode 2 when Obi-Wan goes and says, "Where's this dart from?" And he goes to talk to Jax and he says, "Oh, it's from Camino. Very curious people they are." For some reason, the developers went, "This is the perfect hub central for the game." Okay, fine. Obviously, in the next game, the original trilogy, and then in the complete saga, they did right, and they set it in Mos Eisley Cantina. And the original way that the game worked is that you would walk through doors, and the doors would have episodes 1 through 6 on them, and then there would be chapters 1 through 6, and then you would just basically just pick the next mission. Very simple, very rudimentary, not a big deal. Obviously, this game, they said, let's go bigger, let's go better. Planets, hub worlds, space. What's really kind of impressive about this, what it sort of puts into perspective, not only is the massive nature of this game is huge. There are dozens of different, not just planets, but spaces on the planet. It's not just one spot. You can go to different sections on each planet. And what it really kind of shows is just how big the Star Wars universe is. You start to realize, wow, we have been to a lot of planets. And this affords an opportunity to not just explore these planets in a sense of, I mean, these are not one-to-one movie recreations of these spaces, of course not. But it is one of the best ways to sort of explore these spaces that in some cases were never really explored. I'm thinking specifically of the planet Exegol from the Rise of Skywalker, which is it's a planet that they said, we need a spooky planet. Okay, great. Let's, planet Exegol, whatever. We can talk about Rise of Skywalker in a second. But, so this is a planet that we see very briefly at the beginning of the movie, and then at the end of the movie, we see the big chamber with the Emperor and all that stuff. But we don't really get to look at anything, and then we don't really get to see anything. And so in LEGO Star Wars, we actually get to walk around this planet. Again, it's not a one-to-one movie recreation, but it gives you a better vibe of the planet, and you kind of go, oh, this is like a creepy Sith planet. This is kind of cool. So it actually improves certain things. And there's other things like that. You can explore it is essentially, it's an open worlds game, and it just makes the Star Wars universe feel, I don't know, it just feels really real. It feels far more tactile. It feels far more interactive. You walk around Mos Eisley, and it's huge. It's this massive city. And of course it is. It's a massive trading port. Why wouldn't it be But you don't think about that. You don't really consider that when you're watching the movie, because you only see 2 locations. You see, the landing pad, and you see Mos Eisley Cantina. You think about Luke's house. Well, you can explore the whole thing. In the prequels, you look at things like, Coruscant. You can go to the Jedi Temple. You can see all these different things. There's so much world to explore. And that is even if there was no missions, which of course we're glad they are, but even if there were no missions, this is such an interesting just exploration of these planets and these different things. And of course, beyond the planets themselves, there's space. So this is probably the coolest thing that they've done. In the original games, there were missions where you controlled the spaceships, which is cool, which is very exciting. But, you want to just fly around and do stuff. This game, LEGO Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, finally lets us just fly around in spaceships. And there's dozens of spaceships to collect. Which brings me to my next point. There's so many characters. So many oh my goodness. We know Star Wars is big, right? We know Star Wars is big. We know there's been lots of characters. We've been introduced to so many of them. There's over 350 characters in this game that you can play as. And that's just the base characters. With the DLCs and things, it's over 400. There's over 400 characters. And they did change some of the attributes of each special character, whether it be a Jedi, a bounty hunter, a rebel pilot, things like that. So there's some differences from the original LEGO Star Wars games, which isn't a bad thing. evolve and make things a little different. But what's really, really fantastic is just the variety of characters. Your favorite character in Star Wars, no matter how few minutes they may have appeared on camera or never appeared on camera at all, you probably have the chance to play them in this game. So no matter what esoteric Star Wars character is just your favorite, you will be able to play them. It is, a lot of them are there, and this kind of goes back to the essence of this game, is fun. This game is fun. This game is for fun. This game is to have fun. There are many characters that cannot do anything. They literally, you can just walk around as them. I'm thinking about Babu Frick. For some reason, Babu Frick's on my mind. And you can play as the little tiny Babu Frick. Babu Frick can't do anything, but he's just fun to run around as. And that's part of the game. It's just fun to run around as these characters and to do these things. And it just gives you that variety. It gives you that choice. And more than that, it gives you that choice on the fly whenever you want in these central hub areas. You can, you need a Sith. Well, just pick a Sith, which is very different from, again, we're going to be comparing the original Lego games a lot, but you had to find a Sith in the central areas. And then, of course, when you played free play, you had to pick just a few characters. Now you can just do whatever you want. It's this really big opening of these floodgates that allow you to just play the game exactly how you want to play it. And because there's so much to do, you really want to have that variety. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga has dozens of collectibles and Kyber bricks and all these different things. It has a lot of ships that you have to complete missions to do. There's a lot of different types of missions. There's races, there's bounty hunter missions, there's, you have to help out the rebel fleet and you can attack them and save the battle. There are massive ships that you can take over. It's this really vast game, and it's really quite impressive and exciting. And that's a good way to bring us to the gameplay. This is far more sophisticated than the original games by a country mile. This is quite impressive, the way that they have been able to evolve what the original games felt like to play, but to make it not only far more tight and easy to play, but also it makes it far more natural. This includes not just the lightsaber and Force and Jedi abilities, but also those with guns and other things. Now it's sort of a tight third-person, over-the-shoulder shooter in some situations than it ever was before. You can take cover and you can aim. It's really quite impressive, and it's far more helpful than the original games ever were. And that adds a little bit of a skill. It adds a little bit of a... The original games, as much as I love to praise them and say how great they were a little mindless. You could just kind of press buttons, and because shooting, specifically shooting droids or whatever, you just kind of pointed in their general direction and shot, and then you did it. In this game, it takes a little bit of attention, it takes a little bit of care to be able to understand, okay, we're shooting at these people, we're shooting at these turrets, whatever. And that just, it makes you lean in a little bit more, and you always want a game to make you lean in, and this is that game. And Jedis have far more Force abilities, from not just moving things from one place to another, but now you can choose which thing to build. You can mind control people. That's a new thing. That's fantastic. You start to feel, you really feel like a Jedi. And it creates far more variety and choices as different characters. And now, in the original games, I think a lot of people, myself would say, you always went to be a Jedi because that's the best characters, of course. But now there's far more variety in the other characters. There's far more value in other characters as well. And there's far more choices to be made in every level and every episode. You can do a little more stealth. You can do a little more brute force if you want to be. It opens up these floodgates. And by tightening up the combat, by creating stronger and more valuable Force abilities, you have these choices. And the game feels far more accessible. It feels far more useful. Most characters feel useful. Most characters have a value beyond just, I like this character, so I'm going to play as them. And that just creates value in everything you're doing. And the same is true with the ships. As I said, there's dozens of ships to pick from a whole range of different episodes and different TV shows as well. And so there's different values in each ship. Some ships are faster, some are more powerful, and there's just, you have to now think about, oh, which ship do I want to use for this? Which ship do I want to use for that? And more than just the way that you play the regular levels, there's a lot more variety in the levels themselves. Not only is it that there are situations, certain missions that aren't really missions, they're sort of semi-small missions in the hub world. You have to find somebody or you have to chase somebody down. There's these little sort of mini missions. But also the missions themselves are there's far more variety. Before it was literally, I mean, when you think about it, it's just, okay, you start here, you have to get there, then you're done. Fight through all of the things to get there. Now there's these vast differences between missions. There's much bigger places. And I'm thinking of two in particular, two very, very different out of nowhere kind of missions. And one is like in episode 1, the Battle for Naboo, when you're the Gungans. It's basically tower defense. That's fantastic. That's so cool that they have not only the confidence to say we're going to completely introduce a completely different style of gameplay right now, but we're going to only do it once, and it's just going to be for this little moment. And that's just so you play it and you just go, oh, this is cool. This is different. This is exciting. That kind of thing, that sort of ingenuity is, it was just one guy's idea to go, can we do a tower defense level? And someone said, yes, absolutely, of course, do it. That'd be great. Like, that kind of stuff, you feel it. You just go, that's really cool. Because that wasn't promoted anywhere. No one talked about that. But that's just one of those things where you just kind of go, well, that's neat. I like that. And another special little level was when Rey is in the dark side hole, the cave, in episode 8. And she's in that sort of weird mirror dimension. There's this really unique play moment where you have to then control these 4 different Reys because they're all mirrored, and it's just this weird mind-bending thing. Again, it only happens in that one moment. It was that one moment that afforded it. It was that one moment that said, we got to do something different. We have to do something unique. And it's just this refreshing moment where you go, this is just really cool. It's those little moments, it's those little things that make this game, I think, special and really interesting and unique, because it's not just, oh yeah, we're just remaking all the games, all the levels. Speaking of remaking all the levels, as I said before, we had 6 movies, right? We already had episodes 1 through 6 already very well made, very well adapted into video game form. So a concern that I had, I remember very specifically, is that I've already played 2/3 of this game. Right? Theoretically, I've already played 2/3 of what this game is. Yeah, that's not true at all. Because the devs knew that. They said, look, 2/3 of this game has already been released, essentially, effectively. So we now have to present it in a way that is different. Now, in some cases, you really can't make it any different. Pod racing is pod racing, and you're not going to not pod race, right? So what do? Well, they make it first person, and they make it a little bit more intense. So that's all you can do. But everywhere else where they can evolve the gameplay, they do. But more importantly than that, everywhere else where they could make a different level, because you can't adapt every single moment of the movie into the game. That, you just can't do that. But you have to pick these little episodes, these little moments in each game to make an effort to adapt those. And for the most part, they adapted different moments from what the original trilogy did, the original saga did, the complete saga. And that is incredibly refreshing. That is incredibly interesting, because then you are playing a different game. You are playing a game that feels like it's new. It feels like it's different, even though you've played through this a dozen times. At least I have. That's one of those things where you just, it's that extra level of care. And even on the levels that you have played, again, you can't not adapt certain elements from each episode. You can't just say, well, the complete saga, they already did, Jabba's barge from episode 6, so we're not going to do that. No, they still do that. But what they do is they introduce all these other gameplay elements. They introduce all these other options and these ideas. And then, of course, they just simply present it in a different way. It's a far less strict mission structure. So as I said before, there's these little mini missions. There's these little moments that aren't exactly full-on missions, but they add little bits to the story. And so it creates this variety. It creates this incredible breath of fresh air in this franchise that just, it needed it. It really did need it. For a game where it's actually even more than 2/3 have been played, because episode 7 had a game already. So it was, 7 out of 9 episodes had already had a game. How do you make that different? How do you remake that while still retaining what made it special in the first place? You add all this new stuff into it, and it's just so impressive, and it's so beautiful, because it creates this feeling of just going through the saga. You never feel like you're missing a moment. You never feel like you're leaving anything out. And then again, adding things like the talking, it feels like a whole new game. They did a very, very impressive job putting these movies into game form in a way that we hadn't seen, and that's no small feat. And this is aided by the fact that there are dozens of side quests, and there's replay value out the wazoo. I tell you what is so great about Lego Star Wars is that you have to play it multiple times. It's literally designed to be replayed. That's not even like, it lends itself well to being replayed. No, it's designed so that the first time you go through it, you can't access every spot. It's designed so that every time you go to a new location, you have to figure out what characters you need to access different places. I love games where you can't just play it in 2 seconds. You have to take the time. You have to spend the extra effort to think about, okay, who do I want? Who do I need? There's new characters, there's new ideas, there's new abilities and powers. And it just creates this inviting thing of just come on back. Let's play it again. Let's go through it again. Use a different ship so you can do this. Use a different character so you can open this door. Use a different idea. This character's faster. This character's easier to control. Whatever. And it just says, keep trying. Keep doing it. I love games that tell you this isn't a one-time playthrough. You got to play through it again. And this is all really aided by the fact that it's a genuinely funny game. Star Wars is silly. Star Wars is a silly movie. It's a silly movie franchise. It's not the high art that I think some people think. It's a very good movie. Empire Strikes Back is one of the best movies ever made. Let's not, mince words here. But it is all very silly. And it is all for kids, ultimately, fundamentally. And I feel like we've kind of forgotten that. I feel like with the modern sense of movies, every movie is very serious. Every movie is the end of the world. Every movie is intense and very dark and very all this. And I think that with the sequel trilogy, I think that they got very serious. They got very intense. They got very much a little too intense for their own good. If they had a little more fun with it, had they just been a little sillier, I think they would have had a better time. But what this does is it reminds us that Star Wars is silly, and they do that through genuinely funny gags and jokes. So in the original games, the complete saga, where, again, they didn't talk, a vast majority of the jokes, all of the jokes, had to be told physically. You couldn't tell jokes, you had to show jokes. And they were very childish and very silly, but they were very clever. And even though they could just verbally tell jokes, what the Skywalker Saga does is it still relies on very funny, very silly, very vaudevillian physical comedy and prop comedy. And it just, in this situation, it just works. And it's very silly, and it's very funny. And I think that that's something that it's very refreshing to see, ironically, that they're taking the jokes seriously. They're looking at the jokes and saying, this is our main form of comedy. There's one joke I remember just very distinctly, it's just all so silly. When they're in the Death Star and one of the stormtroopers says, I think it's a drill. I think this is just a drill. And then you pan to C-3PO and he's holding a drill. That's just so stupid and hysterical. It's just so dumb. but it's so funny. It's just so funny that they do stuff like that. And that kind of comedy, it makes you laugh. It makes you smile and remember why Star Wars is fun. Star Wars is ultimately supposed to be fun, right? Which kind of brings us to the fact that Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a very fun game. I do have some complaints about it. One of which is that I feel like there's some concessions made for weird reasons. For one, the menus, I think, are too small. They don't take up the whole screen. But then I played co-op, and having a split screen, it makes sense why the menus were that small. But again, that's not the number one way people play this. I don't think. It's, more or less a single-player game that has, couch co-op opportunities. But that's one thing, that the menus are kind of small and are kind of hard to navigate. The other thing is that there are some things that from the original trilogy that I liked, the original saga that I really liked, that are not here anymore, probably because it would be too complicated. And one of the simplest things is character switching. There are so many characters. There's over 400 characters, as I said. That's a lot. And as I said, you don't really know half of the characters. Some of them you might go, oh yeah, he was in that one scene, or he was that one thing. Or there are characters where you just don't, you know who they are, but they're not very, the Rancor is very neat that you can play as a Rancor. But, you're not going to play a game as the Rancor. Or as, one of the, Kaminoans with the long necks. It's like, that's very neat that you can play as them, but I'm not going to, fight Darth Vader as, a Kaminoan. So there's some sort of an overwhelming nature about it. Also, some of the upgrades. There are upgrades in this game. You can upgrade individual classes. So if you're a Jedi, you can upgrade a couple things. Some of the upgrades are actually kind of annoying to me. Some of them are a little annoying on the screen. They have indications on the screen that are kind of frustrating, and some of them are kind of just unnecessary. There are some things that bounty hunters or scoundrels, which Han Solo is a scoundrel. There's some upgrades that are kind of not very helpful. One of them I remember is the charging the shot. You can hold down the trigger and charge your shot, but that can get actually kind of in the way a couple times. So I turned that off. So there's a couple of upgrades that are not, at least to me, very helpful, and in fact they hinder my progress rather than help it. Other things like the fact that at a certain point, studs to buy things are just valueless because you have so many. You have billions of studs, so you can just do whatever you want. So that's not really a big problem. It's just sort of a market thing, but, who really cares? That's just little details. So, sort of the problems are really, problems because there's so much choice, because there's so much to choose from. The other problems are not really the fault of the game. The simple reality of Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is good movies make good levels. Bad movies make bad levels. That's kind of it. I had high hopes. Oh, the hopes were so high going into The Rise of Skywalker. Okay. We can talk for 2 hours about what was wrong with The Rise of Skywalker. We could go on. But why? Okay. Why would you, you're just throwing everything that The Last Jedi did. I understand. The Last Jedi was a controversial movie. The Last Jedi, Rey's parents are nobody, Snoke is nobody, who cares? Why? That's not cool. Why is Luke Skywalker hiding? That's so dumb. I understand the frustration. But the reality of it is that Rian Johnson took what J.J. Abrams did. He took all these questions. J.J. Abrams, the mystery box guy. He sent so many mystery boxes out. Where's Luke? Where's he been hiding? What's going on? Who is Rey? Why? Who is Snoke? All these questions. That's what J.J. Abrams does. He asks all these questions, but he doesn't answer any of them. He just leaves them open-ended. And Lucasfilm, okay, you spend $1 billion, you spend billions of dollars on these massive franchises, and you don't, make a master plan before you start making these movies? You just make them up one at a time? What are you talking about? So, Rian Johnson has to come in and say, okay, Luke Skywalker is left on the edge of a cliff on this island. He's been there for years. Why? We don't know. It's just a great shot to end a movie on, right? But no, Rian Johnson now has to make the next shot. He has to make the reason why Luke is on the island. So what does he do? He says, well, why would a Jedi be on an island hiding for years? Because Kylo Ren destroyed his Jedi Academy? And what, he's embarrassed or ashamed by that? No, who cares? Luke Skywalker's the guy who never stops fighting. Why would he hide? Because he realizes that Jedi are not the saviors of the universe, but in fact, they are the problem. If there were no Jedi, there wouldn't be any issues. And he actually makes some good points. At the height of the Jedi's power, Darth Sidious rose up and created the Empire. That is a valid point. Maybe Jedi aren't the best thing, but in fact, no, that's not the point. The point is that absolute Jedi, dark side, light side Jedi are the problem. We need to have more gray Jedi like Qui-Gon Jinn, but we didn't explore Qui-Gon Jinn that much. But okay, that's beside the point. Then we find out that that Rey is actually nobody. She's just a girl, but she has these force powers. And Snoke, it doesn't matter who Snoke is. Snoke is just the evil pawn. He's the MacGuffin. Who cares? And the point is that it doesn't matter who you are. You can be a Jedi. You can be a Jedi even if you want to be. Like the kid at the end. The kid at the end of The Last Jedi is a proof that anybody can be a Jedi. So you can have disagreements about what Rian Johnson wrote about these characters. I understand it. I'll give you credit. The Canto Bight sequence was poorly cut and it didn't make a whole lot of sense. I understand what he was trying to go for. He was trying to say that war, like Star Wars, it's a war. It's not great. There's poverty. There's impoverished people. There's a lot of corners of the galaxy that are not doing well. We all get it. I understand. Not really well executed, but I understand the idea. But he took what he was given and he made the best out of it. But then J.J. Abrams comes back and says, oh, I have to do this again. I have to actually answer my questions. So he takes all the things that Rian Johnson left him and says, forget all of that. Snoke actually was the Emperor. Rey isn't actually nobody. She's a Palpatine. And it's just, why would you Rian Johnson respected where you left everything, and he tried his best to pick up the pieces and explain it all away. You, J.J. Abrams, after coming back and looking at Rian Johnson, what he left you, you said, forget it, I'm going to do what I wanted to do at the beginning. If you wanted to direct all three movies, you should have just directed all three movies. But he didn't. He shouldn't have directed all three movies, because Colin Trevorrow should have made his Duel of the Fates Star Wars that it should have been. Anyway, what were we talking about? I think there's been more than enough video essays and people talking about how Rise of Skywalker was not the movie it should have been. And we all kind of know the line, everyone sort of has a line that kind of exemplifies that. I think all of ours collectively is, of course, somehow the Emperor returned. Okay. You have to explain why things happen. Or why... Can someone please explain why Leia died? I don't understand. I don't understand why you didn't... Carrie Fisher passed away in between movies. Make Leia die because she was assassinated or something, and then make that the driving plot. Whatever. Okay, let's not get started again. So Rise of Skywalker, not a very good movie. But Lego, in general, fixes all of our problems. So going into the Rise of Skywalker episode, I had some high hopes that actually maybe it would fix some of it. No. Nope. It's just as bad. And I was quite surprised at how direct it was. The episode's bad, the level is bad. And it's not for lack of trying. There's a lot of creative ideas in the video game version, but they were given such terrible source material. Turns out that riding on the top of a Star Destroyer on a thing is just as weird and not that much fun as watching it. Who knew? It's frustrating, but it's the reality of it. That even the magic of Lego and the magic of this wonderful game cannot fix the mistakes of a bad movie, quite frankly. But I still think credit where credit is due. It makes it's fun to play through The Rise of Skywalker, as ridiculous as it is, as silly as it is. It's still fun. There's still There's still really dumb moments. There's still a lot of stupid stuff. But it's still Lego Star Wars. And at the end of the day, Lego Star Wars is good. Lego Star Wars The Skywalker Saga is a massive game. It's not perfect, but it's really good. I am a very big fan of Star Wars. I think a lot of us are. I think that everyone has their first memory. My first memory of Star Wars was actually Empire Strikes Back. I don't know why I watched that one first, but I did. And ever since then, I've just been in love with it. I think a lot of people who like Star Wars, it's just a very special thing to them. And if you like Star Wars and video games, Lego Star Wars is a really sweet and fun way to live through all these games again. The good, the bad, and the ugly. I think that what's really fantastic about this game, really what it is that we really don't know where Star Wars is going to go. Whether there's going to be more movies, there probably will be. What other TV shows they're going to make. We don't know the future of Star Wars. We have no idea what's going to happen. These 9 movies are a really unique piece of entertainment, of film history, whatever. And it's a really wonderful thing to be able to say, this is a contained story, more or less, a contained story. And I think that to be able to play them in this manner, to be able to just go back, because this game, I'm sure, will live for a very long time. I was still playing Lego Star Wars The Complete Saga up until I played the Skywalker Saga. And that was, 10 years, more than 10 years. Games like this, I think, have very long lives because the stories that they're telling are so beloved. I think, yes, it's very true. Rise of Skywalker is not good. The sequel trilogy is not great. The prequel trilogy is still not the best. The original trilogy is the best. But it presents them all with the same weight. Every game, every episode is given the same effort. It's given the same artistic integrity. It's given the same push to be as equal as anything. And that, I think, is what it needed. Star Wars movies are all kind of up and down. Some of them are better than others. And I think that what this does is it levels them. It reminds us what Star Wars is supposed to be. Not just that it's supposed to be fun and it's for kids. But it reminds us that these stories are so universal in a way that it doesn't matter how old you are. You find value in them no matter where you live, no matter how you grew up. Star Wars is such a wonderful piece of art. And this is this is almost the, sort of the summary. This is the Cliff Notes of Star Wars. And it's such a wonderful representation of that art. It's its own version of itself. And I think that that's something it's admirable to look at. It's admirable to say. And it's quite impressive to think about this. Take 9 movies, condense them down into one game, without feeling like you're missing things, without feeling like you're forgetting things. Just make it work, right? That's a nearly impossible task, but the people over at TT Games were able to do that. I think that they were able to look at the worst parts of each episode and look at the worst episodes like The Rise of Skywalker and say, let's make this as fun as we can make it. Let's make this as interesting as we can make it. Let's do the best we can. And they did better than the best. They made an incredibly impressive game, a huge game that I'm still exploring the corners of. A game that I know in a couple of years when you have that Star Wars itch. Either you're going to watch all the movies again, or maybe you're just going to play this game. And I think that's a legacy that is not only impressive, it is worthy of what I think Star Wars is. I think we all have our own personal feelings about this saga. We have our own personal feelings about every episode. What we can all agree on is that this game, the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga, is the most impressive and the best amalgam of this massive story. A story that's been told for 50 years. A story that we keep coming back to because it speaks to us. It's a story that we keep coming back to because it means that much to us. And this is just another chapter, another little a little charm in that bracelet. It's just another little bit that adds to that feeling for us. It makes us feel like a kid again if we aren't ones now. It makes us feel like we're those little kids watching those lightsaber battles. We're watching these space battles with wide eyes and excitement and a big grin on our face. Because I feel like sometimes we get a little too serious about Star Wars. We get a little too gritty. We get a little too, this is war, this is real stuff. It's a fun story. It needs to be a fun story. And Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, reminds us of that youth. It reminds us of that whimsy. It reminds us that this is a space opera. Yes, there are very serious and very sophisticated, nuanced allegories and elements and metaphors within this saga. We all know that. But at the end of the day, Star Wars should be fun. Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, is the epitome of fun.